Hello everyone, it's a great pleasure to be here, always as usual. And the topic that we were chosen to talk about it today is the power of free will. The resources that we got into is a website, Explore Spiritism, created by Heather Fonseca and Danielle Fonseca. By the way, they are here in the audience. There's two guys there, the couple there. We had information from the book Action and Reaction, and dictated by the Spirits Emmanuel, psychographed by André Lewis, by the mediumship of Chico Xavier, and the Spirits book. So today, even though the topic says something about free will, the power of free will, we are going to approach this in three different aspects. Actually, not three different aspects. We're going to bring like three different aspects. We're going to bring free will, we're going to bring determinism, and we're going to bring fatalism. Because many people, and many people that doesn't have like the knowledge of the Spiritist teachings, the Spiritist doctrine, as many can say, they simply think, okay, I'm fatal to fail. I'm fatal to this destination in my life. And make this analysis, and many people when they approach free will, and specifically their lifetime, they approach looking at only one point of view, only one lifetime. And they forget that we have many lives. This is a story that goes on, and the present life, it's only one chapter of this immense and infinite process, which is life. Life with capital L, that goes one day by the divine providence that created us, simple and ignorant, unaware, as many can say, of course, too, until reaching a point of total awareness, of enlightenment, of divinity, when we can recap the passage of the Sermon of the Mount that blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, in a complete communion with the Creator, with a level of liberty, of free will that can have anything, that can do anything, because these spirits are reaching to a very high level of evolution, and they will know wisely how to use this free will. So, but let's bring a question from the Spirits book. It has been said, let me read it from here. It has been said that the spirit was created simple and unaware. In the book is written ignorant, ignoring the laws. When does free will start to play a role in the spirit's journey towards self-illumination? What do you guys think? Okay, will be a time for you to answer. Now the next slide, we will see that the Spirit's book brought this question, that brought the answer. Free will develops as the spirit acquires self-awareness. This is on question 122 of the Spirit's books. So we have a process of evolution that we will see in the slides ahead. The process of evolution, it limitates us in a momentum of determinism, where the forces of nature from the outside to the inside are going to shape the energies, the molecules, everything. For example, a crystal, a plant, doesn't have a free will because they are subject to the conditions from the outside. But once this process gain through the course of life, through the course of millennia, when we achieve a momentum, a position of awareness, changing from the animal kingdom to the human kingdom, you're going to be granted by this ability to make choices. And based on the choices that we made, can lead us to a pathway of more happiness or pathway of like not very happiness. And of course, it's proportional to the awareness that we have. Answered this question by the spirits, the benevolent spirits, I'm going to bring more attributes of the Spirit so we can have this in mind and as tools for us to rationalize the rest of the slides. I'm bringing here not all the attributes, but the principle, the most important, which is immortality, individuality, intelligence, thought, and reason, conscience, free will, relative power. We have a relative power because complete power, absolute power, only God. We have a relative power because during the course of our lives, we cannot do everything that we want. Thank God. Because imagine, with this moral level that we have, having a complete power, we're going to blow the planet. Based on the sentiments, the feelings that we still resides inside of our spirit. So God is so wise, so just. And we will see in the course of history, we are acquiring more intellectual knowledge according to the moral knowledge that we have. Of course, sometimes we see the extremes, people with a lot of knowledge, intellectually speaking, with very low level of morality. But the divine providence is taking place of everything. It's controlling everything. So we might think that we have control of our lives, but indeed, in fact, we don't have it. God can simply subtract us from this present incarnation and put us in a different stage of life in a heartbeat. So everything that happens in the world, it's granted by divine providence. So there is a big plan for everybody. So bringing these attributes of the Spirit and the chapter, the part of the Spirit's book that comprehend free will, it's from question 843 to 850. On 851, we will see a topic that it has a topic of fatalism. And I am going to bring you the next slide, question 851, so we can read together and make this analysis together. After we say something, so I said something about free will, now I'm going to say something about fatalism, then something about determinism. We're going to combine everything, and let's come to the conclusion. So food for thought on 851 of the Spirit's book. Is there fatalism in the events of life according to the usual meaning attached to the word? That is, are all events predetermined? And if so, what becomes of free will? Now I'm asking you guys, what do you think? Who is the courageous one to try to answer? Yes.
In a position where we have the free will to make the choice.
Say it a little louder.
I think we're given opportunities to make the choice, and that will be predetermined. And whatever choice we make will predetermine the next opportunity we receive.
Okay.
And we continue that way.
What do you think? You guys agree? You guys want to add something? It's an interactive study today.
If we have a lesson to learn and we choose not to learn it, we'll come back again and get the lesson anyway.
Okay. Heather, you want to say something?
Well, I would say some of the events are planned for our lifetime, some of the major events, but at the same time, along the course that we take, where we encounter those circumstances, we have the choice to handle them the way we want, to make decisions that then incorporate incorporates what the other siblings said.
Okay. I guess you all said something really interesting and something true. That's a good thing. It's a good thing. Now I'm going to put the answer that the benevolent spirits gave it to us. Fatalism only exists when applied to the choice made by spirits upon incarnation to undergo this or that trial. Upon choosing a particular trial, they delineate for themselves a kind of destiny, which is the proper consequence of the position in which they now find themselves. As for moral trials and temptations, spirits preserve their free will to choose good or bad, and they are always able to yield or resist. Whatever the circumstances, however, the incarnate spirit will retains its entire freedom of choice. So if we go ahead a little bit more, there is a fatalism in the events that are presented to people as a consequence of the choice of existence made by their spirit. However, there can be no fatalism in the results of such events, because it may depend on them to modify the course of things through their own prudence. And I put here, losing a finger, not an arm. We see fatalism, it's sort of like a plan that we set previously to go into incarnation. For example, I have a karmic process in my life. I don't like to use the word karmic. I have a debts with my conscience, in my conscience with the law. I'm not saying God is punishing me. It's because in the course of my existence, I transgress certain law. I have, for example, a guilty conscience, and I'm willing, I have this desire. It's just like imprinted on my spiritual DNA, urging me to correct this trajectory that one day, actually, the trajectory that one day I deviate in the past. So, for example, when I put this losing a finger, not an arm, it brings me a story that it's very well known in Brazilian Spiritist movement that people say, and I'm going to bring this. It's a gentleman. It's in São Paulo. He's a diligent worker, very big heart. It's tremendous amount of love. He's like an example in a city. And he used to work in a factory. And he was a benevolent soul, incarnate soul in that specific city. But one day, during the course of his life, he lost a finger in a machine that he used to work. In something there. And he was like very upset, like in sort of like in a feeling of ingratitude. By, oh my God, I do so much good. This is what he was trying to rationalize inside of his mind. I don't understand. And he was kind of blaming God. Like, why this happened to me? My God, I did so good, so good. He was a black man. And in one of the mediumistic meetings that he attended, a spirit came, he was actually, didn't want to go to that mediumistic meeting, if I'm not mistaken. But one of the spirits that came to this specific meeting that he was attending mentioned to him, well, you were granted to lose only one finger instead of one arm. In the past, you were a slavery. That because of some kind of problem with another slave that used to, dar em cima, it's a difficult word to say in English. So, hit on. So that slave, he was the lord of the slaves. And he used to hit on this slave. But because something was happening inside of the senzala. Oh my God. Help me, people, please.
Slave house.
Huh?
Slave house.
Slave house, where they get together. And what happened is, like, they saw that what's taking place at that moment, and because was very envy, very angry with that specific slave that was hitting on that slave that he thought that was belonging to him, he grabbed him by the arm and simply get his arm into a machine that was, well, completely destroy his arm. So he was a very mean person with very problems, with moral problems. And this guilty conscience, when he passed to the other side of life, with his guilty conscience, was so like screaming so much and desiring to suffer the same thing. It's not that God wants him to lose the arm. It's something that was imprinted in his spirit. I cannot remove this from my conscience because I have recovering memories, the spirit, what I did when he realized that what he did something extremely wrong. And because of the amount of love, and he programmed a sort of a fatalism. Okay, I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to go into this life as a black man, and I want to lose my arm because this was something that I want to suffer exactly the same that I made others to suffer. And that was exactly that was programmed to happen, a sort of a fatalism. But because of the amount of love that he dedicated to humanity, and we know, going back to the Sermon of the Mount, blessed are the merciful, because they shall receive mercy. We don't have a minimum idea how big is the mercy of the Creator. So because how much you love, a multitude of sins are going to be washed away. We see this in the Bible and the Gospels. And because of that, instead of losing the whole arm, he lost only one finger. And that message was delivered to him, and he was like, oh, okay, now I understand. And he became, again and again, without the feeling of ingratitude, and working diligently towards humanity in this small town that he used to live. So that is the fatalism that, of course, you guys brought some aspects there I think that's very interesting and very important and actually are true. But the Spirit's book brings us, on question 851, this kind of answer, because fatalism has a different conception when we make an analysis, bringing life after life, and we see the whole picture. So now going back to free will. What is exactly free will again? Free will refers to the ability of a spirit to follow the path that it creates for itself, making its own decision and choosing its own acts. The discarnate spirits enjoy that liberty when it has reached a level of evolution in which it is allowed to choose, whether alone or with guidance of mentors, the trials and expiations of its next incarnation. And then we bring determinism and free will. In a chart that we will see, something that we mentioned in the beginning of our lecture, the process of evolution, mineral plants, animal kingdom. We have a sort of determinism because in mineral and plants, the forces from outside drives exactly what is taking place with that specific kingdom. When the animal kingdom, they are driven by instincts. It's a conditioned mode. That's why animals, when they kill something, they don't kill for pleasure. They kill because, or they are protecting themselves, or because they are hungry. Of course, we will see in the top level of the animal kingdom, Sometimes a few animals that play with others, killing by the killer whales we see in the animal kingdom, some kind of examples, animals that already develops a sort of like, it's like, it looks like a free will. It looks like a will of doing something not driven by instincts. And you will see maybe a thin line between the worlds. The animal world, the animal kingdom, and the human kingdom. And then we get to the stage of humans acquiring free will. Prior to reincarnation, we saw fatalism, when we saw in the previous question, 851. And then I put like free will with 2 stars there, because we don't have complete free will. We have a limitation in the range of actions and of action that we are trying to move. And incarnate and discarnate spirits, free will. On the book Action and Reaction, we are going to bring something, a quote about determinism. And it's written like this: in the earliest stages of evolution, determinism may be viewed as being irresistible. The mineral obeys the invariable laws of cohesion, and the vegetable responds faithfully to organogenetic principles. But in the human consciousness, reason and free will, knowledge and discernment affect the forces of destiny. No, let me read it from there. Forces of destiny, thank you so much. Conferring on the spirit the natural responsibilities it must possess regarding itself. For that reason, although we realize that we are subordinated to the effects of our own actions, we cannot forget that each one of us, within this relative determinism, is the result of our own conduct, which may mean quick liberation or a longer, increased or lessened imprisonment in our condition as souls indebted to the law. And that's why it brings us responsibility. The spirit develops free will as it gains self-awareness throughout the course of its incarnations. Free will is a right that a spirit holds by nature. However, it must be understood that spirits do not have absolute freedom. That is, a freedom of action with no consequence. The more enlightened a spirit's conscience is, the greater its free will, and the more accountable it will be for its actions. So, this is where responsibility is employed. During the course of life, when we get to the stage of the human kingdom, we will see more knowledge we acquire, more freedom we have. Freedom to decide, freedom to analyze, to make analysis, to program our own lives. And more aware we are, more moral weight we put into our lives, more freedom we have. This is beautiful because as we can make a comparison, a child, even though it's belonging to a human kingdom, of course, he has a very limited free will. He cannot decide for his life. It's a comparison that we are doing here. So a child has, of course, maybe wishes, desires, based on the limitations, on the intellectual limitation that he or she has. But he is subject to others to take care of that little child. So that's why if we see this progress taking place, more aware, more liberty, more free will. We are going to gain. It's not more free will we're going to gain, like we're going to exercise more our free will. And we have the ability to make better choices or make wrong choices too. But this comes with responsibility. That's why it's so important. Many people that come to the Spiritist teachings or the Spiritist doctrine, when they hear something about a lecture about responsibility, they simply come to the first time and then they run away. Because it brings us responsibility. We no longer can say, I was not aware. I did this, but I was not aware. No, now we know that every action has a reaction. And if the action is good, the reaction, the outcome is good. So having this weight in our lives brings a tremendous amount of responsibility. And if we use the free will according to the laws of nature, to the law of love, of course, we're going to reach to the point more rapidly acquiring this connection with the divine. The divine is always connected to us. We are the ones that are sometimes very disconnected to this divine. And that's why it's so important for us to study more and more. Free will and responsibility. What happened?
It's coming.
It's coming. Spirits always enjoy their free will. This is in question 399 of the Spirits book. Spirits always enjoy their free will. It is in virtue of this freedom that in the spirit state they choose the trials of their upcoming corporeal life. And in the incarnate state, they deliberate.
It's free will.
This computer has free will, yeah. Probably. Say it again. Spirits always enjoy their free will. It is in virtue of this freedom that in the spirit state they choose the trials of their upcoming corporeal life. And in the incarnate state, they deliberate over what they will or will not do, choosing between good and evil or good and bad. Denying humans their free will would reduce them to the condition of machines. In going ahead, forgetfulness of wrongs that were committed is not an obstacle to spirit's improvement, because even though they do not have a precise memory of them, the knowledge they had of them during the errant state, means like between lives, in addition to desire they conceive at the time to repair them, guide them through their intuition, and inspire them with the thought of resisting evil. This thought is the voice of conscience, and it is seconded by spirits who will assist them if they heed their good suggestions. Know thyself, said a sage in antiquity, we will see in the Spirit's book. And even though people do not know the acts they committed in their previous lives, they can nonetheless always know the kind of wrongs for which they become guilty and what their dominant characteristics were. They only have to study themselves in the present, and they will be able to discern what they were in the past, not by what they are per se, but by their tendencies. We have this tendency to find out who we are. I was a prince, I was a slave, I was the conqueror of the world, I was this, I was that. This is not important. This is actually not important. But we know, studying ourselves, as a sage in antiquity beautifully said, knowing thyself, it means make this analysis, make this examination inside of your heart. What is your tendencies? What kind of pathway in life life is leading you, it's going to take you. And we see it's coming, we will see something like, oh, I have the tendency to do something like this, and I don't like it. But I keep repeating this pattern. I have, for example, a recurring problem that comes to my life, and I don't know what to do with. It might lead us to a possibility that we in the past, we were subject to something like that. Some kind of problems related to that specific situation that is going to repeat in our present life. Knowing thyself and making this analysis and making this examination, we are going to create changing the habit and trying to dominate the bad tendencies that we have. And I know it's not easy. Of course it's easy to say. It's not easy to do, but it's possible. And most of the time, we forget a most important tool in our lives, which is the prayer. A prayer is something that connects us to the divine source. I was thinking about like a few weeks ago, trying to create like a figure, like an image in my mind, like an immense, an infinite reservoir. And I put this reservoir someplace in the universe. And this reservoir, it's connected to all of us. And we are like small reservoirs, very small. And we are connected to this reservoir, that it's us, to others, like small canals, small channels. A prayer, when we stop praying, it's like we simply obstruct the channel from the divine reservoir to us, creating a blockage of flow that comes. Of course, this is coming from my mind. Yeah, don't go this like. It's something like this. When we put a block in this little channels that connects us to the divine providence, which is our Father, our Creator, the water that we have stagnate and create like mold. It create like, what we need is get the flowing on. The flowing will agitate, oxygenate, and when the flowing is, we go to reach to a level that overcomes, like goes to the top, it simply goes to the other channels. So it means like charity. The one that have more, give to the one that has less. But we have to open these doors to the flow of love. And prayer connects us always. When the prayer is sincere, is from the depth of our heart, it connects us with the divine source, bringing us possibilities that we don't know. We don't have a minimal idea. I have to run because time is running. Yeah? Now I'm going to bring another question to you guys. In question 852. There are persons who seem to be pursued by fatalism no matter what they do. Is it their destiny to be unfortunate? What do you think? No?
I think I'll give an answer. I don't think so. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that in a sense we all we have certain things that we've decided that we want to learn, but we have the free will to decide how we're going to learn them. We can either be the victim, or we can see what we've manifested into our lives as an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So. Okay.
Did you guys? Okay.
Some families, I think they are. I can even mention a name here, like the Kennedys. I think they are marked by fatalism. I know quite a few, mm-hmm. because the ones I know close to me in Brazil, I don't see anything they might have done in this life that brought them so much tragedy.
So you think? Go ahead.
So I think it was something from a life before.
Can it also be that some people's suffering serves a higher purpose also for the rest of the world to learn also to evolve? So it could be predetermined to serve others and to serve the world as a whole.
Somebody else want to say something?
The gentleman.
Bob, yeah.
Maybe the fatalists, they thought, they say it could be the plan they make in previous life for this incarnation. That's why I think it's fatalism.
Yeah.
But that's the plan that you did yourself.
Okay. Let's see what the spirits answered. Answer. There may be trials which they must endure and which they themselves have chosen. Once more you blame destiny, which is almost always a consequence of your own deeds. In the midst of the hardships afflicting you, make sure your conscience is clear. You will then feel partially consoled. The right or wrong ideas that we form about things cause us to succeed or fail according to our character and our social position. We find it easier and less humiliating to our vanity. The right or wrong ideas that we form about things cause us to succeed or fail according to our character and our social position. We find it easier and less humiliating to our vanity to attribute our failures to fate or destiny rather than to our own fault. If the influence of spirits sometimes contributes to this, we can always free ourselves from it by repelling the ideas they suggest when such ideas are evil. Allan Kardec. And now, Andrea is going to help me. She's going to read a passage from the book Action and Reaction based on the true case. And then I think we'll be illustrating much better one of these cases. So first example based on a true story, others from the book Action and Reaction. Come over here so we can be recorded here.
I'll make it quick.
No, please.
Hello. I think one of the examples that are being brought truly reflects the idea of the power of free will in what we do, even when certain expiatory situations do happen in our lives. So in the book, Action and Reaction, Chapter 7, Andrea Lewis, Hilario are having a conversation with the minister. And I highly suggest that you get this book because nothing else reflects the concept of law of cause and effect, karma, or action and reaction as this book does. And so Andrea Lewis asks, even in the worst possible expiatory situations, doesn't the conscious enjoy the right inherent to free will? And so the minister answers, why not? Let's imagine a monstrous criminal who has been segregated in a prison. Accused of new crimes, he has been deprived of any of the freedom he would experience in an ordinary cell. Even in his condition, if he were to use his time in prison to willingly work for the well-being of the authorities and his fellow inmates, accepting with humility and respect the decisions of the law that is used to correct him, such attitude being the result of his free will to help or harm himself, in a short time, this prisoner would begin to attract the sympathy of those about him, thus advancing surely towards self-regeneration. So let's bring it to us here. They're talking about the issue of a criminal who is in prison. Somebody who has done some terrible things. We have a real example of a friend who, in Brazil, a group of people would visit inmates at some pretty difficult prisons in Brazil. Every kind of criminals we can think of, having done the most terrible things we can allow our imagination to think of. Well, it was around Christmas time, and Cesar, what was his name, was going with the group again to visit the inmates.
1972.
Yes, I wasn't born yet. I can say that. It's good. 1972. Well, he was trying to find out what could he bring to prisoners at a time where most were enjoying time with their families. And here were the inmates, hard criminals, and he didn't know what to say or what to do. In his meditation the evening before, a suggestion from a friendly spirit came about that he should talk about the wedding at Cana Remember the wedding where Jesus was
Transforming.
transforming water to wine to be able to assist his friend whose wine had run out at the wedding? It's a beautiful passage. And he didn't really understand what that had to do with Christmas. What does that have anything to do? So he decided to trust in the intuition that he was receiving that evening. And when the day came, him and the group set out to the prison, and when they got there, they were taken to a room where all of the prisoners were sitting, waiting to hear something consoling for their hearts. Now there was one prisoner who always stood out. He always sat at the back of the room. He never participated. He never let any emotion come through, no smile, no tears, nothing. And that day wasn't different. Cesar Hayes started narrating the story of the wedding at Cana, and then it dawned on him that what he was supposed to tell them at that moment of the birth of Christ was in letting them realize that if they utilized their time correctly, they too could change their lives from water to wine, and bringing them hope and enlightenment in their hearts for the new coming of that time. When Jesus is born, what could that be? What could that symbolize for them in prison at that time? The inmates were emotional because there was an atmosphere about them, the presence of the good spirits obviously there, as it happens when we talk about Jesus. And it was time to end the session, the visit, and one by one the inmates started leaving the room. And the last one to leave the room was the guy that was hardened. As he was about to walk out, he grabbed Cesar by their arms.
Yeah.
And he said, "Do you honestly believe everything that you have just said here?" And Cesar looked at him deep in the eyes and he said, "Yes, I wholeheartedly do." He said, "You have no idea what you're talking about. It is hell in here. You have no idea what we have been capable of doing. Day in and day out, I hear voices telling me to kill other prisons and kill myself. There is no hope in here. There is nothing that you can do to tell me that everything you said is true." So Cesar, in return, grabbed him by the arms, and the two of them emotional, tears flowing down both of their faces, one with hope, the other seeking for that hope. And Cesar Hayes told them, "Everything I have said is true. If you truly believe it, connect to the higher forces, pray and believe, you too can change your life from water to wine." Time passed, and one day Cesar was invited to speak at a small Spiritist center.
35 years later.
Nothing like this. I was already born after 17. Yeah. 35 years later.
In the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro, in a very poor neighborhood. And as Andrea said and mentioned, like was nothing like this, no PowerPoint, like dirty floors made of dirt. And the benches, like poor people. And that specific entity, that specific gentleman that was the president of that center was working with people that actually left a jail and with very hard situations. And Cesar Reyes didn't know who is the president, but he was invited to speak at that center. Okay.
Yes, so Cesar Hayes, he arrived, sat in the front row, as speakers normally do, and the director of the center approached and sat beside him and said, "Hello, thank you so much for joining us today." And Cesar Hayes looked at him, and he got the shock of his life. He recognized the inmate sitting before him, and he said, "Yes, it's me." He said, "After your visit, I had a hard time. I thought about everything that you said. I tried to connect to all the words that you spoke deep to my heart. I heard the voices, the same voices inviting me to conduct crimes inside the prison, but I stayed faithful. And when we left, if you can imagine, society doesn't give jobs to criminals like me. I was starving. I was tempted to commit crimes again so that I could eat, but I resisted. And one day, a kind soul gave me a job, and I started little by little to pick out the pieces and transform my life yet again, utilizing the time, that one patient teacher that awaits for us all in the corrections of our crimes. And here I am. The story is pretty profound, because in the book Action and Reaction, they tell us that one thing we cannot do is escape justice. André Lewis asks the minister, he says, "Could you tell us what is the best way that we can collaborate with the divine law for our spiritual development? Isn't there a way to escape justice? After all, we see this happening all the time, right? People who use their free will to do all kinds of criminal activities, whether it's being seen or not. One of the things that we can't escape is the justice within our own conscience." So he answers, "No one can escape divine justice, especially since our conscience, as it awakens to the sanctity of life, yearns to rightly pay all the debts that it has acquired regarding God's goodness." So with that, I don't think there will be time for the other story. I think you can summarize. So you got to read the book to find out more examples.
The book is beautiful, and the story, it's true. It's a true story. The one that it's on action and reaction. Of course, the names are changed, but the one that was Andrea just mentioned, just told us, it's a true story. It's profound, and transformation in the life of that gentleman. By the way, his name was Jesus Ribamar.
Wow.
And it's a touching story, and it tells us that we can always use the ability to make choices, connecting us with something that has always been present in our lives. Even though we don't have a minimum idea what it's going to happen in the future, and even though we think everything is going to fall apart, everything is set for a plan. So we can progress in life and to experience one day the love that we don't have the minimum idea, but we will experience in the plenitude, in wholesomeness one day, when this connection, it's being fully established with the Creator and the creature. I am going to summarize, because we don't have much time, just so we can wrap it up, the topic, and so we can go to the second part of our meeting, which is the passes. Summarizing the lecture, the issue of free will may be summed up as follows. Humans are not fatally led into evil. Their acts are not written beforehand. The crimes they commit are not the result of any decree of destiny. As a trial and an expiation, they can choose an existence in which they will feel induced to crime, whether through the surroundings in which they are placed, or whether through the circumstances that supervene. But they will always be free to act as they wish. Free will exists in the spirit state, in the choice of trials, and in the corporeal life, in the ability of yielding to or resisting the temptations to which they have voluntarily submitted themselves. It is the duty of education to combat negative tendencies, and it will effectively do so when it's based on an in-depth study, deep study of the human moral nature. And last, when disconnected from matter and in the errant state, the spirit makes the choice of its future corporeal existence according to the degree of perfection it has reached. And finally, with our free will, let us make every effort not to have to return to this world after our present sojourn, and to deserve repose on a better world, on of those privileged worlds where goodness reigns completely, and where we will remember our stay on this planet as merely a time of exile. Thank you so much. I don't think today we have time for questions because we'll have 5 minutes if you guys want to say something or ask something. The difficult ones, I'll pass it to Andrea. The easy one, probably I can handle.